Great. So I'm very happy to welcome you all warmly to our 7th B-CRATOS webinar, and the topic is about prosthetic hands. So this seminar would be basically on the replacement of a missing hand by a prosthesis, which is one of the most fascinating challenges in rehabilitation engineering. For decades, science engineering have tried to match the sensory and motor features of the human body, which is about designing limbs, aiming to replace the shape and functionality of the natural counterparts. Building such incredible devices and making them wearable and intuitively controllable by people is the goal of the prosthetic research. So this talk aims at providing an overview of past and present artificial prosthetic hands developed and discussing the main design issues concerned with prosthetic hand development. So the structure of this webinar would be the following. It will be a discussion between Dr. Marco Controzzi, a professor at Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, and Dr. Francesco Clemente. We'd also like to give you a short description or a short resume about Dr. Marco Controzzi. He designs artificial hands since 2006. He received his BSc and MSc in mechanical engineering in 2005 and 2008, respectively. In 2013, he received a PhD in robotics and ICT from Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, Pisa. And since 2014, he's an assistant professor at the Biorobotics Institute. In 2009, he founded a spin-off company commercializing the robot hands called Prensilia Srl. And coming to Dr. Francesco Clemente, he's the managing director of Prensilia Srl, a company, the spin-off that has been mentioned before, which is manufacturing robot hands for prosthetic and robotic applications. He received his MSc degree in biomedical engineering from the University of Pisa, and in 2012, and the PhD degree in biorobotics from Scuola Superiore Sant'Anna, Pisa in 2016. During his PhD studies, his research activities focused on the design, development, and testing of wearable devices for restoring sensory feedback to upper limb amputees wearing a prosthetic hand. He has been collaborating with Prensilia since 2013 and has a wide experience in design and development of mechatronic systems for prosthetics. He filed 2 patents on this topic and authored more than 30 peer-reviewed scientific papers on scientific journals in the field of prosthetics and robotics. He has been working in several numerous EU and nationally funded R&D projects. There are many to spell out. So it's an honor to have Dr. Marco Controzzi and Dr. Francesco Clemente with us for this discussion. The floor is yours, Marco and Francesco.
Thank you very much, Robin, for this kind words. So yes, we are here with Francesco Clemente. Good afternoon, Francesco. That is a nice friend and expert in this field. So it's, I mean, we thought with Francesco to shape this webinar as a sort of discussion in which we are underlining the main issue behind the design of artificial hands, also sharing some fresh and less fresh state of the art on this topic. Since it's a more a conversation, if you have question on a specific topic, stop us or use, put the questions on the chat here. Anyway, we'll keep some time at the end of the webinar to discuss and answer possible questions. Okay, so let me first of all clarify a possible conflict of interest. I'm the founder and hold shares in Prensilia Srl, the company that is here represented by Francesco Clemente. We do invited Francesco for his expertise, and we believe in Prensilia because it's, spun out from the research of our lab, but it's not the intent of this webinar to sell any products of Prensilia. So this just to clarify. So, but since our experience is through also the knowledge transfer that we made in Prensilia, it's important, in our opinion, to discuss with the experts that are now on the commercial side. Okay, here are the topics that we are going to cover. Briefly, context of the prosthetics and the rehabilitation engineering, and then we will try to discuss this user needs and engineering, this consideration behind the design of artificial artificial hands, and then provide you some example of implementation. And here comes the video that most, in my opinion, represent the skills of the human hand. This was a video that I saw the first time during a lecture of Professor Mason in robotic manipulation, underline how the human hand is very powerful in manipulating, you know, objects, and here in this case food, by, you know, precisely cutting with the knife, but also to stabilize the blade of the knife with the other hand. And yes, after an amputation that may be caused by a trauma or a medical illness, amputees will lose the organ of the artificial hand, and in turn, you know, the quality of life is reduced because of the lack of manipulation ability, sensing. There is also sometimes often pain in the stump of the amputee, and there are also social implication due to the aesthetics of the stump. So the role of the rehabilitation engineering, in general, of the rehabilitation process is to allows the amputee to regain the participation in the work life, meaning then to provide function of the with some artificial device that are the prostheses, but also to try to allows the amputee to regain the social life. And here, if we look at the human hand from the engineering point of view, now we see that the human hand is very complex. It's a very complex organ in which you can identify a very complex kinematic architectures with a lot of degrees of freedom, a very large, wide range of forces, from the tapping force, a few newtons, to a very high force until 300 newtons for young people. And also sensors. There are a lot of sensory in the hands that allows to interact with the environment and perceive the environment and close the loop with the motion. All these features in a very compact organ that it's allows for 400 grams in the weights of the human body. So it's very, very fascinating organs. And here comes with the engineering issue to try to design something useful for humans and solve the problems of the user. And I take this picture from one of the most important book in the mechanical design process that, in my opinion, synthesizes the hard process of designing devices in general, that is try to translate the user needs in something that can be specified with numbers and then manufactured by the engineering staff. And usually this point, it's the most critical in the pipeline, because the needs of the user cannot be received if there are no methods behind the collection of these needs. And here we come with the activity that we usually do. I would like Francesco to briefly explain how we can design in general product, but more in particular assistive device for user.
Yes, thank you very much, Marco. So let's say that in order to solve the issues that Marco was mentioning in his previous slide, you can use several models or procedures that are specifically designed for designing products. In particular, here we show one of those that is one of the most well-known in the field of assistive technologies and medical devices, which is called the HAAT model. Basically, what this model tries to do is to put the human at the center, because H is for human, then the first A is for activity, and AT is for assistive technologies. What does it mean? Basically, it means that the human has to stay first. So first we have to understand what are the needs that the person, the user, has to fulfill with the device that we are going to design. Then we need to understand what are the activities that in which the assistive technology, let's say more in particular a prosthesis, will be used into, and then we can focus on the design of the assistive technology. The ultimate goal is basically to adapt the technology to the user and not vice versa.
Yeah, that indeed the most important part. Try to not force a specific technology to the user, but it's the technology that must be fit on the user needs, that it's a relation to the activity, the context, and there are many constraints here. Okay, and if we talk about user needs, looking at the literature, we can see that, I mean, there are many papers that in the past address the user needs in upper limb prosthetics. There is a recent review from Campus Biomedico in Rome and the Prosthetic Center in Bologna that review the literature for needs in upper limb prosthetics. And what we draw as a common main issues among the different papers is that the current prosthetic hand has a poor functionality due to the limited set of grasp, or in general, or a hand/hand. It's required a very high cognitive effort of the amputee in controlling those degrees of freedom. There is a poor cosmesis that are both dynamic and static. We will see later what we are talking about. And also the lack of sensory feedback, it's another issue and needs from the users. And if we look at the what an amputee can get today, we can see that there are different prosthetic hands. There are two main subclasses, passive and active. Passive are mainly cosmetic gloves that try to replicate the cosmesis of the hand as a look appearance of the hand. There are also specific tools that are used that are passive. The active prosthetic hands are subdivided in body powered, that are hooks, in general hooks that are powered by the residual motion, motion of the residual limbs or articulation of the amputees, while myoelectric are motorized prosthetic hands that are controlled with contraction of the residual muscles in the stump or in other part of the body. And here comes the important to also see the prosthetic hand as one of the pieces of the cake, that the cake is comprised also the user process interface, how we are controlling this device and how we are wearing this device. More in particular, in controlling the device, you can see here how standard myoelectric hands are controlled using electrodes on the stump that measure the potential due to the contraction of the residual muscles. And then this command is processed to open and close the hand. If there are different grips, you can co-contract the muscles and then switch among different grips. However, these two blocks are connected together, so we cannot see prosthetic hand as separated by user process interface.
Yeah, here I would like to add just a very small comment. The fact that, I mean, we now live in the bionics prosthesis era. Artificial intelligence is everywhere, but still today people are using cosmetic prosthesis. And I think that this is nice. I mean, I like this. I like that prostheses come in different sets with different features and with very different, let's say, functions, because this reflects the difference of needs that people with an upper limb difference have. So it's good that we have very different types of prostheses and that this should stay the same so for a long time, because this reflects this difference in the population of people, and we are not trying to, let's say, standardize this part.
Yeah, indeed. So the most advanced myoelectric prostheses are not maybe the more functional for the specific users. So try to not, I mean, fall in the issue and seeing the myoelectric prosthesis as the best option for the user. And we will come on this later. And then, yes, human grasp. So what is commonly used by engineers also not to identify the capabilities of the human hands that we saw has a structure of kinematic structure of around 22 degrees of freedom, depends if we are considering the wrist or not. Anyway, a way to synthesize the capabilities of this kinematical structure is to rely on taxonomy, that are classification of the different grasp of the human hands. I mean, literature, it's very wide in investigating the abilities of the human hand. In general, we can make a synthesis and say that different grasps are used based on different objects or different tasks with the same object. So what it's also we can find in literature is the sort of report on grasp frequency used in activities of daily living, as you can see here. So based on the activities of daily living, you can understand which are the most frequent grasp used, no? And this is a common approach for selecting the best candidate for replicating in the hand. And here, I mean, another piece, important piece of literature that has been used, and it's still under discussion for allows the hands to make different action in activities of daily living, is to exploit hand synergy. So here, the paper of Santello 20 years ago postulate this synthesis of all degrees of freedom in two principal components, or in general, you can find a subset of principal components that describes the ability of the human hand while using tools. And this is a way now to simplify also the complex cinematic of the hand, because you can, in this case, with a couple of 3 degrees of freedom, you can try to replicate a wide variety of postures or relation of these degrees of freedom that are useful for activities of daily living. And here we comes with the recent trend in prosthetics that are represented by multi-grip hands. Here are a set of grasp. I remember that when we started, Francesco, actually the multi-grip hands were not commercially available. I was starting in 2006, and the Michelangelo hand was a work in progress by Ottobock at that time, within also the RPP project funded by DARPA. But later on, starting from iLimb, that first was commercialized by Touch Bionics, and then other prosthetic hands come up, including the ones that we were working on. So I don't know if you want to say something on this.
Yeah, it's been a long journey, and now, luckily, the availability of multi-articulated robotic hands is much wider than 15 years ago. That it was basically when it started to come out a little bit. What we have to keep in mind is that even though these hands look relatively similar, they may hide large differences. For instance, some of them, like the Cobvi, has 6 motors, so each finger can be independently flexed, plus abduction of the thumb is actuated. The bionic hand does not have thumb position, so it has thumb position, but it's only passive. Some of them has wrist movement, some of them don't have a wrist movement. And then other ones like the Michelangelo hand or the Nia hand actually don't have all of the independent fingers available. So really every device is a little bit different from each other, and you have to get to know every difference in order to understand if what is the benefit that each of these may provide.
Yes, indeed, there is, I mean, theory behind the hypothesis behind the design of each of this hand, and then this is a very recent piece of research that, in my opinion, it's very, very relevant. These two papers from Kerver, I mean, make this critics on multi-grip hand compared to the standard myoelectric hand prosthesis. They made this comparison based on some specific assessment that are used in rehabilitation, occupational therapist procedures, but also making use of questionnaires. And they did not find a significant difference between the outcomes using multi-grip hand versus standard myoelectric hand prosthesis. You have some comments here, Francesco, because it's very important, this research.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's an important piece of information to have for sure. Multi-grip hands are not perfect, so they come with benefits, but they also come with downsides, and each user, as we said before, has to evaluate both of them in order to understand which one is best suited for him. And also, I want to point out something that is underlined in the next slide, is the fact that having a multi-articulated hand that may be able to move all of the fingers independently doesn't mean that the user can actually do that in a intuitive way. Okay, so we have to consider the fact that hands have some features, but also the human-machine interface allows to access more or less of these features. And this is a very, very well-known example from Weir and Sensinger on the design of artificial hands for prosthetics, and they put as an example controlling an excavator that is basically a 7 degrees of freedom robotic arm, and you need both your hands and your foot in order to be able to control it. So controlling something that is, let's say, external to our body is much more difficult than controlling our own piece of our body. Okay, so this is also where it lies the value of also the B-CRATOS project and similar projects in order to find alternative solutions that, let's say, provide more intuitive control interfaces.
Yes, indeed. So my apologies, I forgot to mention the chapter of design of artificial upper limb by Richard Weir and John Sensinger. That indeed we take this example from there. So I will amend the slides. But anyway, that's important. I mean, this is what we recall during when we show the different prosthetic hands. We cannot see prosthetic hand as separate by the user prosthesis interface. And in general, with off-the-shelf controller, these multi-degrees of freedom are not controllable, or are controllable, but with a very high cognitive effort that at the end, I mean, the user will not use these features. That's indeed. Is anyway compromise, no, Francesco? Also, when we are working on, as engineers, we are pushed to put a lot of degrees of freedom, a lot of function in the hand, try to push as much as possible the abilities of the hand, but
Yeah, but then you have to face with reality, let's say.
Yeah,
This means that there are compromises that have to be taken when you design a product, and specifically for hand prosthesis, you have a very strong compromise between practicality versus prehensile function. So you need to have something that has a high function because you want the user to be able to perform everything. Let's say this would be the best case scenario. But of course, the device has to be robust, has to be lightweight, has to be cheap in a sense. So all of these, let's say, items and the considerations are carried out during design, in the early design stage, in order to lay out the specifications for the systems that someone is going to develop. And here is a note also related to cosmetic appeal, because usually when you have multiple movements, you also, let's say, so if the number of movements gets closer to the real hand, then you can also shape your hand as a natural one, let's say. So you also get cosmetic appeal, while if you want to focus on function, then usually engineers tend to take very different routes and then design something that is more of a gripper, let's say, so something that allows for a specific function but does not really replicate the cosmesis of the missing limb.
Yeah, function without cosmesis, that it's, I mean, can provide then creeping feelings in using this device in a social situation. And yes, indeed. And if we are talking also on degrees of freedom, there is also this kinematic matching that if there are a lack of degrees of freedom and specific degrees of freedom, then the users is compelled to compensate the lack of these degrees of freedom with compensatory movements. Here an example why we are restraining some degrees of freedom in the wrist and in the fingers, and you can see how the shoulders can compensate for the lack of degrees of freedom. And this is the same for amputees dealing with prosthetic hands and in general upper prosthetic limbs that are lacking for this kinematic matching. So it's very important, but it's important to underline that we probably don't need for a grasping hand all the in the hands, also not from the compensatory movements point of view, but still there are specific degrees of freedom in the hand and also in the wrist that can make the job better. Okay, and here we come with another important topics that is more on the social participation of the amputee in life. And this is a paper from Masahiro Mori that more than 50 years ago tried to discussing the relationship between human likeness and affinity. And this is, I mean, something that is very relevant for the design of prosthetic hands. Just not to clarify this topic, there is, I mean, the common thought is that there is a linear relation between human likeness and affinity. So then, the more is the human likeness of the device, the more you're respecting the affinity with the device. This is the linear relation. However, as underlined by Masahiro, this relation, it's actually more an uncanny valley. So there is no linear relation, and there is a turning point in which actually the higher is the human likeness, the creeping is the feeling, and the lower is the affinity. And you can see here where are prosthetic hands that are in this valley, closing this valley. And this is for static body. So there is a corpse and also the stuffed animal. And if you add motion, it's even worse, okay? And you can see here there are myoelectric prostheses that it's in the valley that it's more deep here. So motion of something that is not recognized as biological might have additional creeping feelings and low affinity. And this is most relevant for multi-grip. Why, Francesco, you asked me to add this.
Yes, because I think it's very important because it, let's say, recalls about cosmetic gloves. So the fact that passive hands are normally still and they don't move, they work really well also for that reason, because as Marco said, it can be you can have this uncanny valley feeling if you see something moving, and the more it moves, the more it gets worse, because what happens is that with 1 degree of freedom hand prosthesis, usually these prostheses were covered with a cosmetic glove. And let's say that if you could see someone working with a hand prosthesis, my electric hand prosthesis that was not moving, then you will maybe not even notice that that was a prosthesis. But then suddenly, as soon as the hand would move, you would immediately understand that there was something wrong, because the movement was completely unnatural. And with multi-grip hand prosthesis, the problem is even worse, because the glove that you put on the hand is very different from the human skin. So they are usually not stretchy enough to compensate, so to follow for all of the movements. And this is one of the reasons why several hand prostheses that are multi-articulated do not use a cosmetic glove, let's say. So we are seeing a shift away from that, from this, let's say, technical consideration, as well as a more personal consideration, because it really doesn't really help much to the cosmesis of the device.
Yeah, indeed. Try to escape from this valley and target this crest here. That it's, I mean, the human likeness is lower, but the affinity according to this relation, it's higher. No, so there is not this push in trying to replicating the cosmesis. Still, we keep the anthropomorphic features of the hand, but the design it's deliberate in non-humans. This is in our opinion, a very, hot topic, and something that we need to push on that. It's the reason why some years ago, indeed, we make this educational experience with Francesco and the European Institute of Design in Turin, that was since that time was very focused on designing for the automotive field, so cars and motorbikes. And then we break this tradition by asking professor to address this topic, that it's design of prosthetic hands. So has been a very instructive period for us, in which we brainstorm and meet with people. Paul, Vanda, you have a question here?
Yeah, it was actually on the previous slide with the uncanny valley. Were you saying that your goal then is to aim for just before the valley with your design?
I can reply to that. Basically, at some point we said, okay, it's very, very difficult to go uphill on the right here, because you really need to have something that is extremely human-like. Right. So it's much easier to go left, let's say. So choose a design that is deliberately different from the human. So it's a robotic thing, let's say. But still, it's much more pleasant than having something that looks like a human, but it's not really like that. So, yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought you had said at the end. And I was wondering, I like that you included moving versus stationary here, because I do think the way something moves actually can be even more unsettling if it looks very human when it's still, but then it moves in a very, you know, this is kind of, I was thinking of like horror movies where, you know, you have a seemingly normal looking person, but they move in like a jerky or unnatural fashion that can actually be increasingly disturbing. Do you think the way it moves is more important than how it looks at the end, or is it just really an interaction between the two? And I guess my second question is, how do you design for that? Like, that seems very challenging to understand.
Yeah, there are, I mean, papers and data set of human fingers motion. So we do try indeed to replicate the trajectory during the closure as much as possible of the human hand. In my opinion, I mean, the affinity, if there is motion, the motion must be human-like, because there are no creepy feelings in recognizing human-like motion. However, if these are together with a body that looks like a human body, but at the end it's not like a piece of human body, such as the myoelectric and prosthesis, this affinity drop down. So we do target non-human design, I mean this anthropomorphic non-human design, but trying also to mimic the motion of the human hand, because this, I mean, just do not reduce the affinity. I don't know if Francesco has some comments here.
No, I agree with what you said. I mean, it's the difference between a corpse, no, as you can see in the curve, and the zombie, no. So you see something that you don't like it, of course, but if this thing also moves, then it's even worse. So you need to design something that is, since the beginning, nice, and because I mean, with movement, it's difficult to improve the situation, let's say.
Yeah. And indeed, also in the robotics, in social robotics, if even though the robots is not anthropomorphic, they try to replicate a biological trajectory, because these are recognized by humans as a safe trajectory. So that the motion, it's make the things roast in case of the body is trying to replicate the human appearance and cosmesis. I don't know if this clarifies, Paul.
Yeah, no, it's all very interesting to me. I was also, I guess, also wondering over time, you know, even if something starts off kind of in that valley, how much can just becoming acclimated and used to the way something moves or look, you know, just shift that valley further into the positive direction.
On the right, do you mean?
Yeah, I mean, is this really, I mean, of course you want to design something that will be accepted, socially acceptable, people will have a greater affinity for it, but, you know, with a curve like this, how much does this curve change over time as well? So if somebody has a very unnatural prosthetic, but they've been using it for years, I mean, they may become quite used to it.
And then the context play a role here. The depending of the, I mean, the context, the age. There are a lot of parameters that may shape differently this curve. It's the perception of the, I mean, of the user, but also it's the perception of the other people around.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is a good point, because of course we as humans get accustomed with everything, so we get used to everything. So the person that is using the prosthesis can get used to it and doesn't notice it, but everyone around will notice that. So this curve is really designed as a first impression response, let's say. So you get that. I mean, you can look online. You will find videos of people watching at a video where are shown images of something that resembles more and more a human, and you see in real time their expression changing between something that is looking to something nice, and then you see this uncanny feeling, and then it gets better again. So it's really first impression look.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Paul, for this question that it's actually interesting for discussing these topics. And we are back on this point that we not targeting the first crest on the left, that it's easier indeed to be replicated. We engage this collaboration with the European Institute of Design. And this was a great opportunity to brainstorm with young people and try to brainstorm different solutions. And yeah, it was very nice as a collaboration, Francesco. What do you?
Yeah. I think it was very inspiring. Also, kind of shows probably how new generations would like to see robotic hands and prosthetic hands. Okay, and this is why we did that, and this is the base, let's say, for the current design of the Mia hand. So for sure, these are concepts, so designs that cannot be translated directly into a real product, but we took them as a base in order to develop a device that is, as we said before, it tries to stay on the left of the uncanny valley, let's say, to be as pleasant as possible.
Yeah, also to raise the attention, in my opinion, to the design, to these kind of topics that are, very relevant, to try to put on this rehabilitation and assisted device engineering process some design in it, that it's the beauty behind the design of devices. And here we comes with the Mia hand that is the one that we are using that makes synthesis of our knowledge on this. And Francesco, maybe you are the most right person to talk about this.
Yeah, here, let's say we try to synthesize what are the outputs of this process engineering and design that we applied to Mia hand. And basically what we tried to do was to, on the left, you see that basically there are two main groups, single degree of freedom hands that are very simple to use, but they are relatively cheap, but they are also limited in functionality. On the right, you have multi-articulated hands that have independent fingers. They can do a lot of stuff, but they are very complex and cost a lot. We tried to, let's say, push this idea of compromises that we've seen before in order to design something that can perform a fewer set of grasps, but tries to do that as in a better way, as good as possible, let's say, so with high performance. And then in the next slide, there is the last, let's say, main point about the end, that is customization. And this is something that really came out from this, let's say, interaction with the European Institute of Design, in which we basically tried to build a device around technologies that allow for the complete customization of the hand, because we wanted to, let's say, move away from the cosmetic glove, because somehow the cosmetic glove also carries a little bit that philosophically, let's say, that sense of hiding your disability. You lost something and then you want to replace it with something that is completely exactly the same, so that no one will notice, not even you. Okay. Then we wanted to move far away from that, trying to, let's say, okay, the new approach could be that you lost something, and then you can have something new that is somehow that you can choose. Let's say this was the main point.
Choose, personalize, make it yours as much as possible. That was indeed what we got from the interaction with the European Institute of Design and the different stakeholders that were engaged at that time. Okay, and these are the main topics that we cover. I don't know if there are questions on this questions, so I mean, just point to clarify. I'm not able to see the chat if you are putting question on the chat. I don't know.
I don't see any questions in the chat at this time.
Okay. Great. So I would close the webinar by thanking Francesco for this nice discussion, Paul for the questions, and also Romin for the nice introduction, and Pascal for the nice organization.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Marco and Francesco. I think Robin said that he would not be able to do the send-off at the end. I just wanted to thank everybody, so that's why I'm talking again. I would like to just thank everybody for attending. If anybody has any follow-up questions for Marco or Francesco, please just reply to the email that you received about the webinar and let us know. We'll make sure your message gets passed along. And yeah, thank you very much to Marco and Francesco. Very interesting talk. Appreciate you answering my questions. Yeah, we hope to see everybody again. I think we'll probably have another webinar in a couple months on a different topic. But yeah, just stay tuned and follow us on LinkedIn and check out our website when you can.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye, everyone.